When creating an RPG, it can be difficult to develop missions that don't cause the player to ask, why am I doing this? I think we've all been there. You're speaking to an NPC who asks you to go fetch some item or complete some task that they could have easily done themselves. Granted, there's a large spectrum of gameplay mechanics that can prevent the player from realizing this to varying degrees of success. But it always ends with the player needing to look past that fact, because if we addressed it, there would be no game. And I will admit that Stardew Valley, being one of my favorite games, is no exception. My name is Davis, and I enjoy playing video games. While playing Stardew Valley recently, that question did begin to creep into the back of my mind. Probably when I was having to collect hay for Marnie's bulletin board request in the community center, when she not only sells it relatively cheaply, but will actually send you 3 times as much as you need in the mail if you're lucky. Regardless, my mind began to wander, thinking about how much of the community center could be completed by the villagers of Pelican Town rather than the player. And then I had a terrible idea. Linus seems to have a good amount of time on his hands. Could he have completed the community center perhaps even before the player arrives? I thought I'd give it a try. I would boot up another save file and play as if I were Linus and see if I could beat the game. But first, some research. A quick Google showed me that some similar ideas have been explored. Waluigi did a playthrough without being able to go back to the farm. And the teacher from The Incredibles did some role-playing as Linus trying to get around town without being seen by the villagers. Both clever ideas that you should definitely check out. I've linked them in the description, but they didn't necessarily capture the same idea I was going for, so I decided to go through with it. To start, I laid out some rules for the run. 1, I have to start with nothing. Get rid of all starting tools and money. Linus doesn't have any of those. 2, I can only use items that I find, items that are given to me for free, or items I have purchased with money that I earned. 3, I have to complete the community center. I think it would be a little too easy just to fish all day every day and pay JojaMart to fix everything. 4, I have to finish before the player would normally arrive in the valley. The game says that an unspecified amount of time passes after your grandfather has died and you decide to go to Stardew Valley. This is indicated with 2 X's, so I would take that to mean I have anywhere from 10 to 99 years. I'm giving myself a maximum of 20 years since it seems like a reasonable amount of time that could have passed, and XX is 20 in Roman numerals. And granted, that's a pretty low bar, but if I can't do it in 20 years, it probably can't be done. And finally, rule number 5, the most important rule. The last rule is that I must avoid the actual Linus at all costs. I'm playing on vanilla with no mods, so Linus will be there, but my headcanon is that he's some wild man from the future, and if I speak to him, the universe will implode. Now, you may be asking yourself, Davis, without any tools, how do you plan on completing the community center? You need to be able to farm and mine for a majority of the bundles. And those are valid concerns, but while I haven't mapped out an exact plan, I've done just a touch of research on what items are needed to complete the community center and how to obtain them. For starters, I'm going to rely on friendship gifts as much as I can. You'd be surprised how many of the items needed for the community center are just sent to you in the mail if you wait long enough. As for tools, I believe I have an alternative for each task that is usually done by tools. I'll also be utilizing the traveling cart when needed and purchasing hard-to-get items. With that, I think we're ready to start. On the first day, I had to do some initial setup. Our name is Linus. We're going to be living on Squatting Farm because this isn't our land, and we're hoping no one will point that out. And our favorite thing is freebies. I've created a bit of a younger Linus here because we're 20 years in the past. Also, right off the bat, I lied a little. I did use the Smappy console to give me some clothes to dress the part a bit more. The next thing I needed to do for setup was to run to Robin's and spend all my money on wood so I could make a chest and deposit all of my starting tools. Then I spent the rest of the day picking up all the forage I could find, really getting into the mindset of a Linus. I also tried to meet as many villagers as I could. If I'm going to start getting free stuff in the mail, I need to be friends with everyone. I realized if I had more of a plan, I would only talk to specific people to optimize the type of mail I would get, but we're not doing a speed run here, so I think it'll be fine. On day 2, Willie gave me my first tool, the fishing rod, and I found a horseradish which rounded out the spring forage bundle. When I play Stardew, I tend to use all of the time available to me, so you can expect that most every day is filled up with foraging, checking the trash, or other menial tasks that aren't that interesting. For the purposes of this video, I'll just be hitting the highlights. For instance, on this day, I remembered to zoom my screen out. I also leveled up my fishing and foraging. I was quickly running out of room in my inventory and had no reliable way to collect wood. So on day 3, I went to purchase some from Robin so I could make a chest. And it was raining, so I also went ahead and caught an eel. Along with the other fish I caught that day, I got to level 2 fishing. Most of day 4 was spent fishing. You'll find that a majority of these early days were spent that way, as it was one of my only ways to get resources. Otherwise, the most notable thing that happened that day was a squirrel giving me an acorn. Also, while picking spring onions, I came up with the genius idea to use the pre-tilled dirt that they leave behind as planting spots, since I wouldn't be able to till the dirt myself anytime soon. On day 5, I was expecting to be introduced to the community center, but it turns out that it has to be after 8 a.m. when you enter the town from the bus stop for that cutscene to trigger. I was never aware of this, because usually I have crops to tend to in the morning, and so it was never an issue. I just thought this was an interesting quirk of this run that I didn't realize I would have to take into consideration. Anyway, after a close call with Vincent while checking the trash cans, I went to check out the traveling cart and spent all my money on a basic sprinkler so that I'd be able to water whatever I planted in place of the spring onions. While wrapping up the day with some fishing, I was able to fish up a treasure chest with a sword in it. I thought this was extremely fortuitous so early in the game, because I could start cutting down weeds. Of course, it didn't occur to me that it was the 5th of spring, which meant I could have just walked into the mines and gotten a free sword at any time. But it was still pretty amazing, because this is way better than the butter knife Marlin gives you. Anyway, I spent the rest of the night clearing weeds from the farm looking for mixed seeds to plant with my brand new sprinkler. Then I hit the sack and got to level 3 fishing. On day 6, I was so excited that I could use the other exits on the farm that I left towards the south and went to check if there was an efficient pattern of spring onions to plant my mixed seeds in. The spring onions weren't in a pattern that I liked, so I decided to wait for the next day. So I went straight to town, meaning I entered from the wrong place, and the community center cutscene still didn't trigger. Then, by the time I realized what was wrong, it was too late to trigger it for the day. I'd have to wait for day 7. Which was raining, meaning the cutscene won't trigger at all. Maybe I'll have more luck on day 8. In the meantime, I went to see what pattern of the spring onions were in, and got very close to what I wanted. But I couldn't afford to waste a whole side of a sprinkler, so I moved on to see what goodies awaited me at the traveling cart. For some reason, I had it in my head that catching the puffer fish would be more trouble than it was worth, so I sold some fish to Willie to afford the one being sold at the cart. In retrospect, that may not have been the best use of time or money. Day 8 was exciting because I was finally able to access the community center. I was also pleased to discover that the spring onions were in a pattern that I could use efficiently, only to have my hopes dashed when I discovered that you can't plant crops outside the farm. So now I have to go back to plan A. Oh yeah, I haven't told you plan A. Like I said before, I have ideas on how to circumvent the normal tool required tasks. You probably already guessed that I'm planning to use sprinklers to water crops instead of the watering can. That's why I spent all my money earlier on just a basic sprinkler. As for planting crops, you need tilled soil, which is usually done with a hoe. Without it, my solution is explosives. That's right, while the obvious and intended use for bombs is to be used for mining, and believe me, I will be using them for mining, an interesting utility of bombs is that they also till some of the land when they explode. So once I have a reliable source of bombs, I can get started on some good old-fashioned farming. Anyway, the last thing I did on day 8 was decide that I needed a way to trash things in my inventory. We're going to pretend like I didn't have that capability this whole time. Since the trash can is a tool that can be upgraded by Clint, the blacksmith, I needed to find one. Luckily, I fished one up from the fountain in the park by the community center, and I wrapped up the day by getting to level 2 foraging. On day 9, I was finally able to speak to the wizard, which allowed me to donate my spring forage to the community center and complete my first bundle. I also went ahead and donated a few of the fish that I'd already caught and sold the rest. On day 10, Marnie came to me with a stray dog. I agreed to adopt it, but since I'm a bit of a wild man, I didn't think this would be much of a lifestyle change for the dog, so I named it Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell. You know, because I'm gonna let him be free range, and I actually live here, and I'm squatting in the dog's feral. Next, I used the money I earned from selling fish the previous day to buy a fiberglass rod from Willie. Then spent most of the day fishing to save up money for a backpack. As a result, I got to level 4 fishing. Day 11 was particularly fortuitous when I happened upon an axe in the forest while foraging for spring onions. This would come in handy on the farm as it would allow me to clear some space and collect much needed wood to make chests for storage. So I ran back to the farm and spent most of the day chopping trees. At one point, I took a break to check out the mines and Marlon handed me some trash for some reason. As soon as I went to the first floor, I realized that without any enemies there, I wouldn't be able to progress in the mines without a bomb of some kind or a staircase. Now, I might be wrong, but I'm not even sure if it's possible for a free ladder to spawn on the first floor, since I would expect the game is trying to teach you that ladders appear when you break rocks. With this realization, I returned to the farm to continue to chop down trees until the day was over. Day 12 was a cart day, so I went to go see if there was anything that would allow me to get further in the mines than the first floor, but there was just a truffle that was out of my price range. Instead, I started a forest behind Robin's house, for one thing, to empty out my inventory, but also I figured it'd be easier to avoid certain space-time continuum threatening individuals if there were a bunch of trees blocking their view. The rest of the day was spent fishing to ensure that I would be able to afford the backpack upgrade from Pierre the next day. And after a quick donation of wood to the community center, my wood chopping efforts were rewarded with a foraging level increase. On day 13, I woke up excited to expand my inventory with a backpack upgrade, only to be reminded that it was the day of the Egg Festival. Oh, it's the Egg Festival! I can't buy a backpack at the... Oh my god. That being the case, I decided to steamroll everyone in the egg hunt and went to bed grumpy. Then on day 14, I bought a backpack so I could hold more items. Then I checked the cart for bombs, of which there were none. So, after fishing most of the day, I decided to put all the wood I'd been collecting to good use and fix the bridge on the beach to gain access to the tide pools. Plus, I was in desperate need of more storage, so I crafted a few chests with the wood I had left over. As I went to bed, I felt that my fishing abilities had improved so much that I should start charging 25% more for each fish I sold. I woke up on the 15th day to the start of salmonberry season, so after spending some time making chests and organizing my belongings, I went berry picking for the rest of the day. On day 16, I spent the day picking berries and fishing. I actually had some really good luck with a single bubble spot in the mountain lake, and then I jinxed it by mentioning it. This is an excellent bubble spot. I'm just raking in fish, dude. And it's gone. Of course I had to say something. Days 17 and 18 were both very similar to day 16. I was mostly just killing time with fishing and foraging until the traveling cart returned, and I could hopefully buy some bombs. I will note that on day 18, I started getting 2 berries from each bush, which meant my foraging level had gone up. And since I had been fishing so much, I also leveled up fishing. When I went to check the cart on day 19, I was disappointed to find there were no bombs for sale. But my mood improved when I was able to find 2 diamonds and a geode in treasure chests while catching 3 smallmouth bass for Willie. I should mention that aside from needing to catch fish for the community center and money, I'm also fishing a lot to try and catch more treasure chests, since they're one of my more feasible ways to collect resources at the moment. Because I found a geode while fishing, Clint stopped by the farm the next morning and gave me the blueprints for a furnace, which is important because I'll need that to smelt ore into bars for crafting. He did say this was because he had noticed me breaking rocks, which is an impossibility at this point, but I just let that slide. I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. And since I was flush with cash at the moment, and too impatient to fish up all the resources necessary, I bought the copper and stone I needed to make my first furnace. On day 21, I accepted a quest from the Help Wanted board to bring a Joja Cola to Marnie. With the amount of fishing I've been doing, I figured that'd be easy enough. I was bound to get one at some point. As I went about my day fishing, I remembered that it was Sunday and I should go check the traveling cart for bombs. And while there were no bombs, there was a sturgeon, which can be a bit of a pain to catch. So I figured I'd save myself the trouble and just buy one for the community center. Plus, that wrapped up the lake bundle, which would open up more of the community center rooms. Once that was donated and I received some fishing tackle that I couldn't use yet, I went back to trying to fish up a Joja Cola, which I finally found after it was too late to give to Marnie, so that would have to wait until tomorrow. The next day, while looking for Marnie to deliver the benefits of all my hard work, I found a Joja Cola just laying in a trash can, making all the effort I put into finding one yesterday a complete and utter waste of time. And on top of that, I couldn't even find Marnie all day, so I never even had a chance to give it to her. My only consolation on such a dreadful day was that I got 2 hearts with Caroline, which means I can expect the recipe for tea saplings in the mail tomorrow. Linus is about to be rolling in cash. After opening my mail in the morning, I quickly collected the recipe for tea saplings and made as many as I could, which I immediately put in the shipping bin. Continuing about my day, I happened to run into Marnie on her way to aerobics class, and out of spite, I gave her the Joja Cola that she had been asking for, even though the deadline had already passed. It was not appreciated. Then lastly, while fishing, I witnessed just a straight up sea monster out in the ocean. What is that? What was that? I've never seen that in my life! I've played so much of this game, I've never seen that before! Selling 30 tea saplings earned me a pretty penny, so now, incredibly wealthy, I woke up on day 24 to a visitor. It was the local field researcher Demetrius, who offered to relocate some fruit bats into the cave on the farm, which would benefit me greatly in collecting fruit for the community center. I eagerly accepted his offer. Now that things were really starting to kick off, I thought it would be a good idea to make a chest for the items that I needed to donate to the community center. Then, with G bursting from my grass skirt, I skipped on over to Pierre's to buy the second backpack upgrade and fully expand my inventory. Except, it's still locked. Also, it's Wednesday. Oh no! So Pierre was closed and I would have to buy a backpack tomorrow. So I decided to spend my money elsewhere and buy a new fishing rod from Willie. However, despite watching him walk into his shop because it was the day of the flower dance, his shop was closed, and I couldn't get the new rod. What good is having money if no one will sell you anything? On day 25, I did all the shopping I had tried to do the day before, and to celebrate my new rod, I fished all day. Before bed, however, I did pick up the gatherer profession when I got to level 5 foraging, and my fishing skill increased to level 7. Day 26 was spent in basically the same way as the day before, except for a quick stop at the traveling cart. While there weren't any bombs to buy, I did get a large brown egg, a green bean, and a solar essence for donating to the community center. With spring coming to a close, I took advantage of the rainy day to catch the catfish and shad for the community center. And when I saw a request for a Joja Cola from Leah, I figured I could oblige, even if she was planning to roast it for some reason. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but more power to you, Leah. On the last day of spring, I checked to see if there were any bombs at the traveling cart. There wasn't, and then tried to gather as much forage as I could find since it would be gone by tomorrow. And with that, we've wrapped up the first month of Stardew Valley as Linus. I've still got no way to progress in the mines, or farm any crops, but the fishing and foraging is going well. 2 bundles are already done, and 2 other bundles are only 1 fish away from being completed. Plus, I've already got an iridium fishing rod and a fully upgraded backpack, so I'm pretty proud of that. I also found an axe for collecting wood and a sword for fighting monsters, even though the only monsters I've encountered so far have been weeds. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to tune in next time and see if I can find a way into the mines. But until then, thanks for watching.